and go. Woo! Listen to that. And 60. Oh my God. Woo! Oh geez, I'm in a Wrangler going that fast. All right, my friends. Well, so there's that. This is the Rubicon 392. It is the Jeep Wrangler that has paddle shifters. All right, my friends, let's talk about what we've got here. And I can't think of a better place to start, but right there under the hood, because this thing is all about the motor. I just decided that because most people are going to be into this motor more than anything else I talk about here today, we just start here and get right to it. So under the hood of this, the 392 6.4 liter Hemi V8, 392 cubic inches. The specs, 470 horsepower, 470 pound-feet of torque, and it wants premium fuel. Remember that, because that's going to cost you a lot to feed it at those fuel economy numbers. Now, look at how this thing is packaged under the hood. It is a tight fit in here, but look what's under the hood here. This air intake system is really quite a piece of art, I think. It is an air intake hood. You can see the snorkel right there. Basically, because this is a Jeep, they didn't want this thing sucking mud, water, snow. You're going to go splashing and fording streams and doing all kinds of crazy shit with this thing. This system can filter up to 15 GPM, gallons per minute, out of the air intake. And as you're driving along and water is just flowing in there, I'm picturing a fireman with a hose just hosing water into this thing. And that's almost how much water this can actually pull out of the airstream so that it doesn't get into your motor. And that's basically done through a lot of what you see here, a combination of gravity, hydrodynamics. When the hood is down, that seals into the box over there, and away you go. Now there is a second air intake track so that if that is clogged, if it has snow, mud, whatever in it, it's not going to run out of air for your motor. So I think this is one of the coolest things besides the motor on this Jeep. So now that we got that out of the way, just for you people out there that couldn't wait another minute to talk about the motor, let's talk about the price on this thing. $95,000 and some change. Now this starts base price at just under 90, but with all the options we have, and we'll talk about a few of those in a minute, we're at 95K. That is a lot of cabbage for a Wrangler, the most expensive one I think I've ever driven. It's got the 8,000 pound worn winch up front, and looking at the front you can see one of the big changes styling wise for this year is the revised grille. Nice new take on the 7-slot grille, and up in the front on top you can see the aforementioned air intake hood. Really, if you start looking at this thing a little more closely, you can see that it's sitting a little bit higher. It has the factory lifted suspension, 35-inch tires, 17-inch beadlock capable wheels. It has a unique frame and unique suspension. It has just a lot of beefed up stuff to not only handle the weight and power of this V8, but it's a Rubicon, so it's got all of that as well. Up on top, this has the power opening canvas roof, one of my favorite features of this thing besides the motor, if I'm honest. Huge spare tire, and down underneath that bumper you can see quite a large involved exhaust system. And so it opens flaps, and it really gets loud when you put the hammer down. And so I'd say it's time to start talking and get to that. All right, my friends, let's go for a drive. But before we do that, I wanted to illustrate one of the very first things that you notice when you fire this baby up. You know you're in a V8. This thing explodes to life. I don't know how well you could hear that on the audio, but you can just hear a big blat come from the exhaust at the back. And if it's in your garage, it's definitely going to wake you up, or other people in the house. So I just want to kind of do that. That's part of the fun of this. No question about it. Yeah. You know you're in a V8 from the moment you start driving this. And since we've already talked about all of the specs and the features with the engine, I really just want to get to the business, because if you watch my videos, you know the question I always like to ask is, how does it go? So we're going to come to a complete stop. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and there's nobody in our way, and go. Woo! Listen to that. Woo. Now I need to come off the throttle and slow down, slow down, slow down. I got a big corner up here and this thing is boating around like crazy. This is a Wrangler with 470 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque. You got to correct the steering when you're under power. Woo! Yeah, that'll put a smile on your face. That'll wake the cops up for sure. But again, you got to know this thing boats around like a Wrangler that's got that much power. Now, they tell us 0 to 60 in about 4.5 seconds. That's what that felt like. And I got to tell you, when I just launched back there, I felt the steering get really light, almost like this thing kind of got a little bit of a wheelie going on. Now, I don't think I actually got air in the front, but the steering suddenly got this sensation like, yeah, this thing just really, really launches like a boat. You got to get up to speed and then it planes, so to speak. So yeah, power is great. Power is great. This transmission, great. It does the job. It's always done the job. This motor's done the job in everything I've tested. The Challenger, the Charger. It's great. That it's here is even greater. Now, fuel economy. Cattle guard. Yeah, so fuel economy. Know that this thing wants premium fuel. Yeah, so every time you do this, yes. And this thing gets not very good gas mileage too, I've got to tell you. This thing, 12 miles to the gallon in my week with it. Yeah, 12 miles to the gallon. Now it's rated a little bit higher than that, 13 city, 16 highway, but 12. Now, as an aside, my Hummer H2 that I had back in 2005 got 12, but this has got horsepower. It really didn't. So, at least, you know, when you're feeding it premium fuel, know that you can hit the pedal and get some joy out of it. This powertrain just makes me happy, obviously. It gets 5 out of 5 stars. All right, so I got that out of my system. I just had to do that first, get the motor out of the way, because it really is the biggest story here. It's the motor, the motor, the motor. But there is the chassis and the drive and what's it like to live with every day. Well, first of all, it's a Rubicon, so it's got the best off-road suspension that's offered on the Jeep. This has the 35-inch Extreme package, standard, so it's got the big tires, the big wheels. Basically, it's got all of the off-road toys. It's got the lockers. It's got full-time four-wheel drive that is always four-wheel drive, and that's because of the horsepower. You don't want this thing in two-wheel drive ever, so it just comes in four-wheel drive, but you can adjust it to four-wheel drive low for those off-roading excursions. 48:1 crawl ratio. It's got all of the goods when it comes to off-roading, but how does it feel? Well, this is heavy, all right? It's 650 pounds more than the standard Rubicon. So what does that mean? Well, it feels heavier both on the highway and off, and we'll get to off in a minute. But out here on my favorite windy road, you know, this has got the standard kind of roly-poly Wrangler handling. Feels like it's a little bit on a marshmallow, but here it feels like it's got big heavy boots on because it's got a heavier duty everything to handle the power of this V8. And of course we've got the V8 on the front of this thing adding all of that extra weight, so it feels like it. I've noticed that the steering is a little bit, you know, less precise maybe. Road noise, pretty good. On my highway test, this rang out at 61.4 decibels at our 70-mile-an-hour freeway stretch, which is dead nuts average. And the loudest thing is wind, and a lot of that comes from this canvas top. Whew. You really don't want to throw this into a corner too quickly. Just don't. But again, I'm coming to a corner. You want to hit the brakes a little bit and get around it. Now, I did notice that the brakes on this are a little bit hard to modulate. I don't know if that's just the extra weight or the extra rolling mass of these tires and wheels, but these brakes take a little bit of getting used to because you really got to lay your foot on them. But I want to find out what this handles and drives like off the pavement. Out on the trail, this is where this vehicle was built to go. So it's no surprise that we're able to do it. And because this is a Rubicon, this is the one that you can literally drive up a cliff if you wanted to. It's got all of the stuff. It's got a locker in the front, locker in the back, disconnecting sway bar, solid axle suspension, front and rear. It's got all of it, man. It's got all of this stuff. And of course, the big tires and wheels. But what it's also got is the weight of this engine under the hood, which I can definitely feel compared to some of the other Wranglers that I brought out here. Obviously, this is going up this hill and taking these ruts and these moguls, no problem at all. I'm not even switching anything on, no special modes, no low, no locks, nothing. I'm just driving, right? In its baseline form, this is a vehicle that can literally go anywhere without very many problems. So I'm not engaging any of the toys, don't need to do that here. This is just going on, right? So, yeah, here we go. Ah! Yep, it works. So I know BFD, you drove over some bumpy trails. But here's the rub. This solid axle in the front, solid axle in the rear, and all of this heavy duty goodness does come at a price, and that is a level of everyday living with it, refinement. And anyone who's spent life with a Jeep Wrangler knows that it certainly isn't a BMW. It's not expected to be. But if you've been paying attention to this video, you have heard rattles and shakes and squeaks, and this entire interior feels like I'm in a box full of nuts and bolts. And I hate to say that, but it's the reality of the situation. The next place I like to test a vehicle is the desert washboard road. And so out here, why, this is a fun vehicle to toss around because it's got power. You know, you don't want to go too fast around gravel corners, but you could if you had the room and space, and there might not be a Subaru around the corner with a couple of ladies in it trying to enjoy a nice day of hiking. But this is a vehicle that, very much like the Raptors out there, has the power to blow and go out in the desert, and it has the torque to do the crawling up the hill. I will tell you that there's a lot of rattles and shakes and squeaks and creaks in here, and this washboard road is really bringing out a lot of the shuddering and rattling and shaking that I'm getting in the chassis. And the steering is not precise, and I get a lot of kickback in it. So while this is a very capable vehicle in the extreme off-road sense, in the living with it every day, ride, drive, and handling sense, this is a chassis that gets 3 out of 5 stars. So we've done all the fun stuff first. Now we're going to talk about the interior just for a couple of minutes, because there were some important things they did in 2024. That is the dash. They've actually given us a larger infotainment screen here, and they've taken what were previously the round vents on each side of the smaller screen and created 2 rectangular vents below the now 12.5-inch center screen. And we'll talk more about the infotainment system separately in a minute, but that's a big change. And then they've also added a lot of soft trim to the dash that really makes it a little bit more luxurious, and that's a good thing because we're in a much higher price category now. As I sit here, this is pretty much a fully optioned Jeep, being the Rubicon 392. It's got leather seats. Here they're red with the black. The steering wheel ahead of me, it has the paddle shifters on it. Again, the first Jeep I've ever driven with paddle shifters, and well, I guess it's almost something that you need to have here. Ahead of me is a very familiar instrument cluster, 2 analog dials, and then a digital center screen between them. The seating position here is very upright, like we've always had in the Wrangler. You know, it's a nice place to be. They're not uncomfortable seats. These are power seats now for 2024, a new addition. And there's also side curtain airbags here. So they've added a number of things for 2024. And as you can see here above me, I've got lots of light. This has the opening canvas roof, which I absolutely love in the Wrangler. I know it's an expensive option. Yes, it's a very expensive option, but it's nice to be able to do that because it's a whole lot easier than taking the entire top off if you want to have that convertible experience. Down in the center console area, you can see all of the major switches for the doors and for all of the off-road traction toys, the lockers, and of course the lever for the 4-wheel drive system. Cup holders down low so you can have big giant cups in there, never going to be in your way. And in here, we've got a pretty good level of storage, a little bit larger than a square tissue box. And then there's also this top section here, which this is where the tools are to remove your doors, but it's a nice bi-level console. Your rear seat passengers are never really going to be that comfortable in a Wrangler, and every Wrangler I've ever tested, this is what it looks like. Big as this vehicle is, the seating height is pretty low, and the bench actually isn't that big, and it's flat, and it doesn't have a lot of support. It's just not that comfortable back here, if I'm honest. And while I do have a decent amount of space here, about 1.5 to 2 inches ahead of my knees with these seats set for my height, if I had somebody bigger sitting up here and pushing that seat back, I would probably be touching my knees. Looking down there at the rear of the console, I do have some good amenities though. There's air vents, and down below there are the switches for the power windows, USB ports, and an AC outlet for plugging in something like, say, a laptop. Now back there, the cargo area in the back, not the biggest. It's got a lot of stuff taking up space back there, but you can fold these seats forward just a little bit to give yourself some extra space, but it's not the flat, perfect load floor that you would expect in most of the mainstream SUVs. So when it comes to rating this interior, it's really sort of a bittersweet thing. We're at $95,000 here. And so that is a lens I have to look through, right? At $95,000, any other SUV that you would be in, you'd have a lot more feature content in here. Now I understand this is a Jeep. It's got a high performance V8. It's got all of the high end hardware underneath. That's a lot of where that money goes, but still we're missing a lot of stuff, and they're charging us for a lot of extra stuff here at this price that just sort of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Floor mats, for crying out loud. The roof, I get that, but floor mats. So yeah, I'm sort of complaining about little things, but there's this other thing on the market now called the Bronco and the Bronco Raptor, which offers a lot more in the interior, and the design and the overall livability of that interior is much improved over the Wrangler. So this interior, in the light of the price and the competition now, gets 4 out of 5 stars. The infotainment system here is all new for 2024. It's a widescreen, 12.3 inches, and it looks good. I like what they've done with the vents to make everything work here, and I like the fact that they've retained a number of hard controls down below it that allow you to just reach over and twist a knob for volume, twist a knob for tuning, and you still have all the HVAC controls down below there, although when you go through the menus on this new system, you do have some higher level controls built into the touchscreen, so you can have it either way. Now the sound quality on this, not nearly as good as I would have expected for this price range. That was really kind of a surprise. This is fully featured though. It has Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, they're wireless. It has Bluetooth connectivity, it has AM, FM, and of course, satellite radio, navigation. All of the features, the bells and whistles that you would expect here exist. Using it, it's very easy. The menus are very well laid out. Uconnect in the past has always been very good there, but I think my chief complaint here is the fact that, again, at $95,000, we're missing a few things. If you put it in reverse, it's not using the full screen for that backup camera, especially in an off-road vehicle. You want to be able to get views all around this thing. Where is the 360-degree around monitor? You'd think for 95 grand we'd have that. It does have a front camera, but again, not giving you the full use of this screen. So I think it's a missed opportunity, and I think with the sound quality not being nearly as good as you'd think it'd be for this price, this system gets 4 out of 5 stars. So we've test driven it, well, at least on the road, and got some good, nice fun out of that motor, and talked about quite a few other things. The question really becomes at the end of the day, is $95,000 a good deal for a Jeep? Any Jeep, I don't care what it's got under the hood. That's a lot of freaking money, man. Imagine if it were a Gladiator 392, it would be a little bit more, probably. I think we'd be tipping the scales at 100K. That said, it is a man toy. This isn't supposed to be a good deal. If you look at a Ram TRX, if you look at any of the Raptor stuff that Ford makes, they're not Consumer Reports Best Buys, if you know what I'm saying. This is something that if you want it, if you got the money, it doesn't matter what it costs. I mean, that's the stark reality of it. So is it a good value? I don't know, you know? So I look at things like quality, warranty, feature content. How does it compare to the competition? Well, I did recently test drive the Raptor Bronco, which honestly, it's kind of a different animal. That's got a twin turbo V6. It feels lighter on its feet. It's a little bit more forward into the off-roading toys, where this is really more of a muscle car of a Jeep Wrangler. And so they've got completely different personalities. I mean, you can put them side by side, you can compare them and do all of that. But honestly, I think the one you're gonna like out of those two is the one you test drive and go, that's the one for me. So I'm not gonna get into that. I'm just gonna say they're both very cool. I like this a lot, love the color. Is it a good value? 4 out of 5 stars, and I think that's being generous. 95K is a damn lot of money for this. And so when you put that in with everything we've already talked about here, we are at 4 out of 5 stars for the review. Pretty good, I'd say. I love it. I love Wranglers, and this is just the ultimate, isn't it? So there you go for our test drive. You can see our latest one right there. Better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there. Either way, stay tuned.